Good morning.
Morning, Mama.
I'm Maya Van Rossum. I'm the Delaware Riverkeeper, and my organization is the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And today, I'm just going to speak to 3 of the myriad of problems that we have experienced at the hands of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Number 1, in assisting pipeline proposals, FERC adopts as its own the claims and information provided by the pipeline applicants, even when faced with evidence and information that the pipeline company's information is false and or deficient in critical ways. The FERC's draft EIS for the Penny's Pipeline project was so embarrassingly poor that it was questioned by 9 federal and state agencies and thousands of public comments. The Penny's draft EIS included embracing claims of economic benefit while ignoring economic damages, including up to $178 million in lost property value that will result if the project is built. Also ignoring the loss of $53 million over a period of just 20 years of ecosystem services that would result from pipeline construction, including harms to drinking water, to food supplies, to recreation, and to nature-dependent jobs. The Penny's draft EIS out of FERC also relied upon blatantly false information. For example, FERC accepted Penny's assertion that just along a 1/2 mile stretch of the pipeline, there were only 2 vernal pools and groundwater seeps, when the Delaware Riverkeeper Network's monitoring found at least 12. FERC also put forth in the DEIS the assertion that there were no private water supply wells or springs located within 150 feet of proposed pipeline construction, thereby potentially putting it at risk, while just a cursory analysis by Delaware Riverkeeper Network confirmed 10 likely or confirmed wells within that proximity. In this draft EIS for Penn East, FERC routinely ignored missing information. For example, the 8 threatened, endangered, or special concern mussel species that could occur in the pipeline path, which were never even mentioned by Penn East. And they ignored totally the impacts from the estimated 3,000 fracked gas wells that the pipeline will cause to be drilled and to be fracked. How is it that the public and other agencies can find such significant deficiencies, but FERC itself cannot? Number 2, FERC routinely embraces pipeline company claims of need, which clearly advance corporate goals rather than the public good or need. FERC's Penny's draft EIS asserts that the project is needed to provide low-cost natural gas, to displace Gulf Coast gas with Marcellus shale gas, to provide, in quotes, enhanced competition amongst natural gas suppliers and pipeline transportation providers, to supply flexibility, diversity, and better pricing. These are clearly corporate goals and gains. They are not public goods or needs. It is neither morally nor legally legitimate for FERC to approve construction of a pipeline project, granting exemptions from state and local laws, giving the power of eminent domain, approving unmitigatable and irreparable environmental and community harms, so that a pipeline company can achieve corporate goals or greater profits and a competitive edge. Number 3, after approving pipeline projects, FERC strips people of their right and ability to challenge that approval before the pipeline company gets the power of eminent domain and is given the authority to move into construction. FERC intentionally put the Delaware Riverkeeper Network in legal limbo for 15 months while it issued over 20 notices to proceed for the Southeast Leidy pipeline project. By the time we were released from that legal limbo, the pipeline company had cut trees along 21 miles of right-of-way on 209 acres of land and inflicted irreparable harm to at least 8.5 acres of pristine forested wetlands. FERC's strategy meant that in the case of the Northeast Upgrade Pipeline project, that project was fully constructed and in operation by the time the Delaware Riverkeeper Network won our legal challenge against FERC's review and approval of the project. Obviously too late for any meaningful remedy or response. FERC's routine disregard of facts, law, and rights invalidates the integrity and the defensibility of its pipeline decisions. We need a Congress that is elected by the people, that actually protects the people, including protecting us from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and its fracked gas pipelines. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Spencer Phillips. I'm an economist with more than 25 years' experience in the natural resources field. My colleagues and I, who are in the back of the room here, they should stand up, have examined the economics of several proposed interstate natural gas pipelines, as well as how well, or not, as the case may be, FERC has done its job to consider those economic effects. We have found that FERC's pipeline certification policy suffers from failures of both design and execution that guarantee that the American people will be saddled with an economically inefficient and environmentally unsustainable excess of pipeline capacity. Common sense and fundamental tenets of economics tell us that an action is worthwhile if and only if the benefits outweigh the cost. U.S. environmental policy, moreover, requires that cost include the foreseeable negative consequences stemming from damage to ecosystems. FERC's pipeline certification policy does make a nod in this direction. It requires pipeline companies to demonstrate that their proposals benefit the public without imposing uncompensated residual adverse effects on affected communities. Beyond that whiff of good intention, however, FERC's policy is completely inadequate for evaluating the costs and benefits of proposed pipelines. Here's why. First, FERC's process is plagued by confirmation bias. FERC's stated policy is for the applicant to provide information that supports FERC's approval. By asking only for information supporting a foregone conclusion, FERC fails to subject pipeline applications to a full, rigorous, or economically adequate examination of the proposals. Second, FERC almost relies exclusively on cost and benefit information supplied by the applicants, who, acting in their own self-interest, present inflated estimates of benefits and greatly discounted estimates of costs. In the cases we have reviewed, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the Penn East Pipeline, and the Millennium Eastern System upgrade, the applicants provide no serious consideration of any costs at all. But some of the important costs that pipeline applicants, and by extension FERC, fail to consider include the following: reductions in private property value along the length of pipelines and extending outward through the right-of-way, the high consequence area, the evacuation zone. Applicants and FERC do cite fundamentally flawed, industry-sponsored studies that claim that there is no such effect. But credible, independent research shows that pipelines do have significant negative effects on property value. There's also lost natural benefits like drinking water, aesthetic quality, wildlife habitat, and food production. And there are foregone economic development opportunity. As recreationists, tourists, retirees, entrepreneurs, and workers choose safer, more environmentally healthy, and more aesthetically pleasing locations to live and work in. Those costs can be significant and staggering. For the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, where we estimated the cost for just 1/5 of the length of this 500-mile pipeline, those costs total between $6.9 and $7.9 billion. For the Mountain Valley Pipeline, we looked at the region impacted by just 1/2 of the pipeline, which is 300 miles in length, and estimate between $8 and $8.9 billion. And finally, for the entire Penn East Pipeline, which is only 118 miles long, but in a part of the country with different cost of living, our examination reveals external costs of approximately $38 billion over the lifetime of the project. So the results of FERC's flawed policy and subsequent failure to give serious consideration to benefits and costs are inefficient and inequitable, but they are also unsurprising. There's already more than enough pipeline capacity, and the addition of the Penn East or other natural gas pipelines awaiting FERC's foregone approval will only make matters worse. That's the inefficiency. The outcome is inequitable because pipeline companies will profit as they pass the financial cost of these wasteful projects on to ratepayers, while simultaneously burdening landowners, residents, business owners, and visitors with massive external environmental costs for which there will be no offsetting benefit and little chance for just compensation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I hope I can read this. I forgot my glasses this morning. My name is Paul Blanche, and I'm a professional engineer with more than 50 years of experience with nuclear safety and regulatory issues. Over the past 10 years, I have provided pro bono consulting to both SAPE and 2 Riverkeeper related to the AIM pipeline crossing the Hudson River. For the past 10 years, I've been attempting to address pipeline dangers in the vicinity of the Indian Point nuclear power plants. Most industrial accidents in the world can be attributed to failure to comply with established regulations. This includes Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, BP oil spill, and San Bruno. Without any regulatory enforcement by FERC, we are sitting with AIM on a nuclear time bomb capable of destroying the Hudson Valley. We mentioned before billions of dollars of impact. We're talking trillions of dollars of impact with the nuclear power plants. Spectra has certified compliance with all regulations. However, FERC makes no attempt to even question or inspect to verify regulatory compliance. They blindly accept certification without verification. The major shortcomings is that the regulations specifically require a risk assessment, which is vital to the proximity of the AIM pipeline to the Indian Point nuclear power plants. FERC, PHMSA, which is a pipeline hazardous material safety agency, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have all refused to provide any documentation of a risk assessment for the impact upon Indian Point. The NRC claims they conducted a risk assessment and state the blast radius is 1,100 feet. 3 professional engineers, myself included, independently calculated the blast radius using the same NRC data and equations and determined it would be more than 4,000 feet within 6 minutes of a pipe rupture. This encompasses the entire nuclear site and would likely destroy all the safety and backup systems of the nuclear power plants. The NRC chairman, who I met with a year ago, also misrepresented to members of Congress about the risk analysis, and Spectra falsely stated in its AIM application that it was in compliance with all federal regulations as specified in 49 CFR 192 without exception. Should an accident occur, the consequences are unimaginable and would likely result in a permanent evacuation of New York City and surrounding areas with social and economic damage in the trillions, that's with a T, impacting 20 million residents and workers. FERC is not requiring adherence to safety regulations that require a risk assessment, and this is clear in the regulation, and evaluation of the consequences. FERC is not addressing other important requirements, including such things as public awareness of danger, emergency response by firefighters and other emergency responders, pipeline integrity, protection from terrorism, and 21 additional pipe failure mechanisms. Indian Point is one of the primary terrorist targets in the world. A FOIA request was submitted to both FERC and PHMSA requesting a copy of the risk analysis, and the response was they did not have a copy of the risk assessment. All agencies have refused me under FOIA to provide this risk assessment. We are faced with a dire situation. FERC refuses to provide any assurance that the public is protected from a gas explosion and probable nuclear catastrophe. Based on all our communication, it clearly appears that neither FERC nor PHMSA have any intention of enforcing critical regulations until after a major accident. This practice is commonly referred to tombstone regulation. Regulations are only enforced after the tombstones are counted. No gas pipeline application should ever be approved by FERC until all the requirements of all the regulations are addressed, providing future continued compliance and enforcement. In order to protect Americans, we must stop this regulatory infallibility and tombstone regulations, not with new regulations, but enforcement of existing regulations right now. Thank you.
My name is Amy Rose Marin. I'm a former councilwoman in New York and co-founder of Stop the Algonquin Pipeline Expansion. FERC will not rescind approval of the siting of the Algonquin pipelines at Indian Point Nuclear Facility, even though it is aware that pipelines sited there pose a unique national security risk that threatens the 20 million people within the 50-mile impact radius of the plant, as well as the U.S. economy. There are 2 existing pipelines at Indian Point and a massive new one, the AIM, being built there. FERC is aware that pipeline and nuclear safety experts warn that a rupture in the AIM pipeline at Indian Point could result in a radioactive release greater than that at Fukushima, rendering the region and likely New York City uninhabitable. In the first few minutes of a rupture in the pipeline, the explosion would have the TNT equivalent of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, followed by additional explosions. FERC is aware that Indian Point is a key terrorist target and that pipelines are vulnerable to hacking, as well as drones, physical access, and vehicular explosions. A pipeline at Indian Point is an undeployed weapon of mass destruction. However, FERC will not rescind its approval. It is well known that even if Indian Point were to be shut down today, the gas pipelines would continue to pose a catastrophic risk for years due to the radioactive spent fuel rods in the spent fuel pools and potentially to the radioactive spent fuel stored in dry casks. It takes at least 5 to 8 years from the time the reactors are shut down until the spent fuel can be cooled enough and stored in dry casks. Transferring to dry casks is likely to take longer, given the extremely high cost and the NRC position that there is not a significant safety benefit to requiring full transfer to dry cask storage. FERC is aware that the pipelines are not adequately protected and that the mitigation measures for the AIM, burying it 2 feet deeper and adding concrete slabs above the pipe, have not been tested. According to Richard Kuprowitz, pipeline safety expert, these mitigation measures are unlikely to offer protection. Kuprowitz further states, "I have yet to see a steel pipeline that cannot be damaged by third-party threat activities." FERC's approval of the siting of the AIM at Indian Point was based on the statement from the NRC that it did not present a risk. Yet FERC is aware that the required risk assessment of co-locating the pipeline with the Indian Point nuclear plant was not conducted. Moreover, FERC is aware that what the NRC presented as a risk assessment that deemed the siting safe violated its own policies and procedures, was based on false information, defies the laws of thermodynamics, was based on a modeling system, Aloha, that is prohibited for a pipeline rupture in this configuration, has the incorrect shutdown time for the gas pipeline, incorrect blast radius, incorrect detonation capacity, and omits information regarding the threat of ignition of a vapor cloud. Not only was the required risk assessment of co-locating a gas pipeline and a nuclear plant not conducted, the required vandalism assessment at this key terrorist target was also not conducted. In protecting the interests of the pipeline owners, FERC is ignoring the unacceptable risk and disastrous consequences to the public of this significant threat to national security. Pretending it is safe will not protect us.
I've spent my adult life fighting the worst of what industry was doing to ecosystems around this continent. I fought old-growth clear cuts, genetically modified organisms, mountaintop removal coal mining, desecration of sacred indigenous lands, copper mines, you name it. In 2012, some friends and I learned that Dominion planned to build a massive liquefied natural gas export terminal in southern Maryland, where I was from. For the first time, my home, where my family lived, where I grew up, was under attack in a big way. I resolved to do everything I could to stop this terminal. Dominion Cove Point is, in many ways, the centerpiece of the gas infrastructure build-out the Mid-Atlantic is experiencing. When this was being permitted, exports were seen as the way to fund entire industries in the U.S., be they coal or natural gas. The biggest profits could be made by loading up tankers and selling to foreign companies. A dense web of pipelines, compressor stations, and all sorts of infrastructure was proposed to feed the gas to export terminals on the coast. Since then, the economics have changed, but Dominion is stubbornly continuing to build this terminal. And FERC has blurred and hidden the facts to help Dominion at every step. I want to focus on two major grievances. FERC accepted Dominion's wildly misleading population synopsis of southern Calvert County, where the export terminal would be located. Only 2,368 people in Solomons and 2,538 people in Prince Frederick were mentioned, leaving out the remaining 39,732 people living between the two. The biggest omission was 20,483 people in Lusby. The town the export terminal would be built in is by far the most populated part of Calvert County, and it was completely left out of Dominion's description of the area. LNG terminals are supposed to be remotely sited. There's no other place in the world where an LNG terminal exists in such a densely populated area. However, this terminal is literally across the street from houses, nestled into a neighborhood, surrounded by 2,365 homes, 19 daycare centers, 3 churches, 2 schools, and 2 shopping centers, all within 2 miles. FERC was made incredibly aware of Dominion's inaccuracies, and it didn't care. The permits were issued anyway. The other grievance I want to address is FERC's implementation of the National Fire Protection Association's Guideline 59A. The guideline was created to establish federally recognized safety standards for LNG terminals. Every few years, a new version of NFPA 59A is approved that incorporates lessons learned by the industry to make these facilities safer. FERC has allowed Dominion to use the 2001 guidelines, which were written at a time when LNG export terminals didn't even exist in the U.S. Among the things the 2001 version does not require is a mandatory quantitative risk assessment. A QRA takes a thorough look at what could go wrong with the project's infrastructure and determines appropriate emergency responses. Every version of NFPA 59A since 2013 requires a QRA for these volatile facilities. Additionally, 2013 and later versions include the calculation of risks to persons outside the boundary of an LNG plant, arising from the potential releases of LNG and other hazardous substances stored, transferred, or handled in the plant, and are also applicable to existing facilities where significant modifications and improvements are proposed. Obviously, all of this is critically important for an export terminal sitting in a town of more than 20,000, but FERC refuses to make Dominion use a modern and appropriate version of NFPA 59A. In 2006, the nuclear plant 3 miles away got the state to conduct a QRA on Dominion's then import terminal. It concluded that more than 1,000 people living nearest to the facility faced a constant risk of being consumed by a flash fire at any moment. How many people risk being consumed by a flash fire now that a full-scale power plant and liquefaction train with its 410,000 gallons of stored propane are being added to billions of cubic feet of LNG on site? We don't know, because the FERC won't make Dominion do a QRA. An explosion already occurred at this exact terminal in 1979 that killed a worker, critically injured a second, destroyed buildings, and led to changes in the nation's electric code. Fatal explosions have also occurred at other LNG export terminals and Dominion facilities. This isn't hypothetical. FERC is putting thousands of lives on the line to move this project forward. We're doing all we can to shut this dangerous project down before it gets started. Dominion says it is nearly a year of construction left, and we're hearing rumors of major delays past that. There are numerous paths that could lead to construction being stopped and people's lives being protected in Calvert County and everywhere infrastructure would be built to feed this monster. However, FERC has consistently shown no interest in taking public safety seriously. FERC has made it clear that its top priority is the unfettered churn of business. People's health and safety be damned. For these reasons and many more, I firmly condemn FERC's handling of this project, and I'm honored to give this testimony today. Thank you.
Hello. My name is David Sly. I represent Wild Virginia and the Dominion Pipeline Monitoring Coalition and work against the Atlantic Coast and Mountain Valley Pipelines, the ACP and MVP. Under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, FERC is to cooperate with other federal agencies to conduct environmental reviews that meet the needs of decision makers. Agencies such as the U.S. Forest Service and the EPA have expertise and experience that FERC lacks and must be heeded. Too often, though, FERC ignores or downplays the importance of issues raised by the Forest Service and EPA. In many instances, FERC settles for inadequate data from applicants and accepts and endorses conclusions unsupported by proper analyses and facts. FERC has failed to fully acknowledge many great challenges and risks posed by the terrain ACP and MVP proposed to cross. Very steep slopes, high landslide potentials, sensitive habitats and species, and great risks of surface water and groundwater pollution prompt doubts that the pipelines can be built in ways that protect the environment. Standard construction and pollution control measures cannot be assumed sufficient, yet FERC has been willing to accept boilerplate plans from the companies. The Forest Service, by contrast, insists that site-specific analyses and plans are necessary before it can allow crossings of public lands. The uncertainties and risks are too great to accept vague assurances that everything will be okay. In one of many requests for more and better information, the Forest Service sent letters to FERC in October demanding site-specific construction plans in what the service termed high-hazard locations. But FERC's rush to produce a DEIS without this information deprives the public of the chance to review and comment on it for the MVP. We fear the outcome will be the same for the ACP. FERC has displayed a similar disregard for EPA comments on NEPA documents for pipelines. We reviewed 18 cases across the nation in which various EPA regional offices commented on FERC EISs. In every case, EPA deemed the information in the draft EIS to be, in its words, insufficient, a characterization that's much too mild in light of the substance of those EPA comments. Officials pointed to the FERC's flawed analyses of route alternatives and cumulative impacts, its failure to address long-term damages to water bodies and mature forests, and its outright refusal to follow NEPA regulations in regard to needs analyses, greenhouse gases, and environmental justice. In the face of EPA's criticisms, FERC in many cases persisted in the same errors and omissions from the draft EIS to the final EIS. FERC must not have the option of ignoring the opinions and judgments of environmental agencies that have greater expertise and credibility. Congress must see to it. Thank you.
Okay, is Belinda? Oh, there.
Yes. Hi, Belinda Blazek. I'm here in regard to FERC's approval of the Garden State Expansion Project, docket number CP 1589. Transco filed with FERC a request for approval of its application for a certificate of public convenience and necessity authorizing its Garden State Expansion Project to construct a 30,500 horsepower compressor station and related gas infrastructures in Chesterfield, New Jersey. These infrastructures will be located in a residential area. The closest home is 150 feet from the site. There are hundreds of homes and 4 schools within 1 mile of this site. We are not only concerned about safety, but also about possible impacts on our well water, streams, and wetlands. Transco's selection of the site, in which it cannot avoid significant wetland impacts to satisfy its minimum needs, not only contradicts the requirements of FERC, but also of the Freshwater Protection Act, Also, Transco did not provide adequate evidence to rebut the assumption that the proposed activity could be accomplished at another location that would avoid impacts to freshwater wetlands, and FERC did not evaluate these alternative sites. It should be understood that Transco's site location selection may be influenced by its purchase of the property. The Freshwater Wetland Protection Act and the Clean Water Act rely on the 4041 guidelines to provide guidance regarding the preparation of alternative analysis. The Freshwater Protection Act at New Jersey, AC 7:7A, defines practicable alternative and clearly states that an area not owned by the applicant may be required. Furthermore, FERC's wetland and water body construction and mitigation procedures states in section VIA6 that applicants do not locate above-ground facilities in any wetland without further justification. To date, Transco's proposed compressor station 203's footprint does not totally avoid wetlands, and Transco has not requested a modification from FERC's procedures. Lastly, the Commission should have required a full environmental impact study. Another area of concern is the use of segmentation, which is a violation of the National Environmental Policy Act. The following projects, including the Garden State Expansion Project, New Jersey Natural Gas Southern Reliability Link Pipeline, and the Penn East Pipeline, are inextricably linked. NJNG is a 20% partner in Penn East and is getting their 180 decatherms of natural gas from them. Penn East is putting that gas into Transco substation in Ewing, which is part of the Garden State Expansion Project. That same amount of gas will then go to the Garden State Expansion Compressor Station in Chesterfield and into the Southern Reliability Link Gas Pipeline, which is the Garden State Expansion Project's single customer. The in-service dates for all three projects are virtually identical and will be under construction at the same time. They are clearly being built in concert, one for the other. FERC's ongoing use of practice of segmentation to advance pipeline projects in pieces to make it easier to overcome regulatory requirements and state reviews and approvals is in violation of the National Environmental Policy Act. The impacts of these projects in our communities raise serious questions of FERC's review process. Congressional investigation and legislative remedy are needed. The R in FERC stands for regulatory, not rubber stamp. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Hargett, and I'm here with my colleague Denise Hamler from Green America, a national nonprofit organization working to build the green economy, one that works for all people and our planet. On behalf of our 250,000 individual and 3,000 business members and activists, we have engaged with FERC to encourage the agency to end its practices of rubber stamping pipeline projects and liquefied natural gas terminals that endanger the welfare of local communities and contribute to climate change. Like our allies, our experience in working with FERC has been deeply disturbing and makes clear that FERC rarely rejects pipelines and other infrastructure projects and disregards the concerns of local communities who are at risk. Our initial involvement was over Dominion's Cove Point LNG export terminal that Donnie Williams from We Are Cove Point just told you all about. This export terminal will export fracked gas from the U.S. overseas. Green America staff and members took part in numerous demonstrations against Cove Point, and it has been heartbreaking, to say the least, to hear their stories of how they've purchased homes and are raising children in an area that they thought was a safe and beautiful place and now realize that all of this is at risk. 2,000 people live in a blast fire kill zone identified by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and 265 homes are in a no escape zone. Additionally, export terminals like Cove Point, which are proposed for all over the United States, will trigger a wave of destructive new fossil fuel infrastructure from the web of pipelines to carry the toxic flammable fuels across our communities to an exponential increase in tanker traffic along environmentally sensitive waterways like our Maryland's Chesapeake Bay. Green America's individual and business members joined the chorus of groups urging FERC to conduct a more rigorous environmental impact study on the proposed export plant at Cove Point. We delivered 7,500 petition signatures from our members urging FERC to fully evaluate the environmental consequences and community impacts of the proposed project. We delivered those petition signatures to two commissioners' offices, Commissioner LaFleur and Mueller. but FERC approved Cove Point despite all of the massive downsides. In our dealings with FERC, it has been evident that there is little interest in community input and no concern at all for the climate implications of Dominion's Cove Point facility. In fact, post-meetings, we received 2 emails from one of Commissioner Mueller's staff that were dismissive, disrespectful, and mocked our crazy idea that clean energy like solar and wind could power our homes and businesses in America. We believe this is the result of FERC's bias in support of the industry it's supposed to regulate. Since FERC is 100% funded by the industries it regulates, it has no incentive to deny any project that comes before it. FERC has only denied 1 natural gas pipeline project in 30 years since it has been funded this way. The revolving door between FERC employees and the industry it regulates that we heard a lot about today. FERC's very difficult process for the public to file comment, and FERC not allowing people to speak at all at their public monthly meetings. FERC's use of consultants who work for the pipeline industry and clearly have conflict of interests. And many more, as we have all detailed in our joint letter requesting congressional hearings. So at Green America, we believe it is time for Congress to, 1, hold FERC accountable for actually assessing the full risks of the projects it currently rubber stamps, 2, create a structure that is independent of the industry it regulates, and 3, take into account the voices of the impacted communities across the nation. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Courtney Williams. I am a resident of Peekskill, New York. My home is 400 feet from Spectra Energy's Algonquin pipeline. My children's school is 400 feet from the route of Spectra Energy's new Algonquin incremental market expansion. I also hold a PhD in molecular biology and work as a cancer researcher. I'm here today to give testimony as a scientist and as a mother. As a scientist, I am familiar with the rigor of the scientific method and the standards upheld by the peer review process. It is my testimony that FERC does not follow the scientific method nor meet the standards to which the scientific community holds itself. FERC's work product, environmental impact statements, on which they base their decisions, are incomplete, inaccurate, and unfairly biased in favor of the applicants. You have heard testimony from Paul Blanche and others today regarding the siting of the AIM pipeline next to Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant. He testified that FERC has ignored the safety data and permitted Spectra to construct their 42-inch fracked gas pipeline only 105 feet from critical safety infrastructure necessary for the safe operation of the plant, endangering millions who live within its evacuation radius. That is far from the only evidence they have ignored. Throughout every impact statement they produce, FERC says that any and all impacts can be mitigated. Yet nowhere does FERC actually measure or accurately report the information necessary to measure those impacts. When FERC released the draft environmental impact statement on the AIM expansion, it took me 30 minutes of research in the scientific literature outside of my field to refute their claims about the impact of clear cutting would have on Blue Mountain Reservation in Westchester County, New York. FERC had clearly ignored or failed to read the relevant scientific literature to inform their conclusions. Another example of FERC's dereliction involves emissions from gas infrastructure. FERC relies upon self-reported information provided by applicants. Nowhere do they report whether or not they have independently verified that information. The estimates reported are total yearly emissions. These data are useless in determining impacts to human health. The rate at which these emissions are released is critical. Yet nowhere is that information reported because that information is never gathered. As a cancer researcher, I know that the dose makes the poison. If a chemotherapeutic agent is given as a massive bolus, the patient dies. If the agent is dosed periodically over weeks or months, the tumor shrinks and the patient lives. The rate at which gas infrastructure pollutes the air is critical to know and yet completely ignored by FERC. The emerging scientific literature supports the consensus amongst the scientific community that fracking is harmful for the environment and human health. Yet FERC continues to conclude that any harm from fracked gas infrastructure emissions can be mitigated, emissions that they neither verify nor properly measure. Here I have mentioned only 3 examples of many to illustrate the ways in which FERC ignores science to the detriment of the public and the benefit of the fossil fuel industry. Their environmental impact statements do not meet standards for scientific rigor, nor would they pass scientific peer review. As a result, the public health and the environment suffer. And I would just like to conclude my testimony by acknowledging that the stories you're hearing today can be really hard to process. So I ask, please do not be disheartened. Use what you've learned today to fight in your community for environmental justice, because we know that justice will not be served until those who are not affected are as outraged as those who are. So I hope we all leave this room today and continue to fight for environmental justice for every community. Thank you.